welcome to Chore Chapters, because everyday tasks need good company. I'm Leo, and with me as always, we have got Luna.
Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we've got a thrilling and interesting story lined up, so grab your headphones and let's dive straight into the story.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into a case that's, well, truly baffling and just incredibly sad. It's the disappearance of the McStay family back in 2010 from Fallbrook, California. Joseph Summer and their two little boys, Gianni and Joseph Jr.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, and we've got quite a bit to work through here. Lots of news reports over the years, court documents which are crucial, and a really detailed investigative report. We're aiming to sort of piece together the key parts of this really complex puzzle.
It really started as this deep mystery, didn't it? I mean, a seemingly normal family disappears, just vanishes. They leave groceries on the counter, their dogs are still in the house.
Yeah, exactly. And then their Isuzu trooper turns up way down near the Mexican border, so the immediate thought, was maybe they left on their own.
Which is just such a strange idea. What makes an entire family pack up and leave everything behind like that?
Yeah,
it makes you wonder.
It does, and that idea that they left voluntarily, it stuck for a while, but then the whole story just takes this absolutely gut-wrenching turn in November 2013.
Right, that's when they were found.
Their remains, all four of them, found in these shallow graves, way out in the Mojave Desert, like over 100 miles from their home.
God, that's awful.
And that discovery, obviously, it changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't a missing persons case anymore. It was, a full-blown homicide investigation.
Absolutely. So the question becomes completely different. Not where did they go, but who did this? How do you go from missing to this brutal murder? That's really what we need to unpack.
Exactly. So we'll trace a timeline, look hard at the critical evidence, the stuff that really mattered, and follow the legal twists, because it did lead to a conviction eventually.
But it sounds like maybe not all the questions got answered.
That's often how it is with these complex cases. Even with a conviction, some things might still feel unresolved.
Okay, let's dig in, starting right at the beginning, the day they vanished, February 4th, 2010. What do we know about their last sort of confirmed movements?
Well, the last solid contact seems to be around 5:00 p.m. There were text messages between Joseph and Summer then. Summer also spoke to her sister that day.
Okay. And wasn't there some video footage?
Yeah, a neighbor's security camera. It caught a vehicle, looked like the McStay's Isuzu trooper leaving their cul-de-sac later that evening about 7:47 p.m. The problem was the footage wasn't clear enough to see who was actually driving or inside the car.
Okay. And Joseph? Any calls or anything later?
He made one last known call at 8:28 p.m. Tried to call his business associate Chase Merritt, and went straight to voicemail.
And his phone. Did it show where he was?
At that moment, yeah. His phone pinged a local tower there in Fallbrook, so it looks like he was still in the area, likely near home, around 8:30 p.m.
So it seems like a normal evening, maybe some texts, a call, and then silence.
Pretty much.
Then comes the initial investigation phase, which, looking back, seems to have gone down a bit of a rabbit hole. This is from, February 2010 until maybe April 2013?
Right. And a huge development very early on was finding that Isuzu trooper, it was located on February 8th, just 4 days after they were last seen, parked near the border crossing in San Ysidro.
Which immediately fuels the they went to Mexico theory.
Exactly. It seemed like a pretty strong indicator at the time.
And the authorities even put out that border crossing video, didn't they?
They did. That was March 5th, 2010. The San Diego Sheriff's Department released this grainy footage, time-stamped February 8th around 7 p.m. It showed, what looked like a family of four walking into Mexico. That video really cemented the idea for many people, including investigators apparently, that the McStays had just left.
But people who actually knew the family, they weren't buying it, were they?
Not really. There were things that felt off even then. A family friend who was doing some painting at their house went over there on February 17th with Joseph's mom. This was like after they were missing, but before the police had a warrant to search properly.
Okay, what did he notice?
He saw some things he thought were strange, like the cover from a futon was missing. There was dried paint in a tray, like someone just stopped mid-job, and clothes were kind of scattered in the master bedroom, which he said was really out of character for Joseph, who was apparently very neat. And this friend actually mentioned being worried because Joseph's mom was trying to tidy up, and he thought she might be accidentally cleaning away potential evidence.
Wow. That's significant. Because the first official welfare check, the deputies didn't report seeing signs of a struggle. But this friend's observations suggest maybe something is wrong inside the house.
It certainly raises questions. But yeah, the official line, publicly at least, seemed pretty fixed on the Mexico theory for a long time.
How long?
Well, it wasn't until April 2013, that's over 3 years after they disappeared, that the San Diego Sheriff's Department publicly stated they believed the family went to Mexico voluntarily.
3 years.
Yeah.
And then just a few months later.
Exactly. Everything changes.
Hmm.
November 2013. That discovery in the desert.
Tell us about that. How did it happen?
It was November 11th. A guy riding his motorcycle off-road near Victorville in San Bernardino County, remember? That's over 100 miles away from Fallbrook. He stumbled upon what looked like skeletal remains in shallow graves.
Just stumbled upon them?
Yeah. And over the next couple of days, investigators came in, excavated the area, and confirmed there were 4 sets of human remains.
And they were quickly identified as the McStays.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
Joseph Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr.
And did they know how they died? Right away.
The autopsies determined the cause of death for all 4 was blunt force trauma, just horrific. And adding to that horror, they found a sledgehammer, believed to be the murder weapon, actually buried in one of the graves with the bodies.
Oh, my God.
So obviously this immediately shifts everything. It's clearly a homicide. And because the bodies were found in San Bernardino County, the investigation jurisdiction changed. It moved from San Diego Sheriff's to San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department.
So a fresh set of eyes, essentially.
Right. A new team taking over, looking at everything again, but now with the certainty that this was murder.
And that new investigation, it seems like it pretty quickly started focusing on one person, Joseph's business partner, Charles Merritt. This starts heating up around November 2014. What pointed them towards him?
Well, several things started to line up against Merritt. He was arrested November 5th, 2014. A big piece was motive specifically, a financial motive.
Money, right.
Yeah. Investigators found out Merritt owed Joseph a good chunk of money, around $30,000, supposedly from a gambling debt. And maybe even more importantly, they learned Joseph was actually planning to fire Merritt from the business they worked on together, Earth-Inspired Products.
Okay, that's a pretty strong motive right there. Debt and losing your job. Was there other stuff? Behavior things?
Definitely. There were behavioral red flags. People noted that pretty soon after the family vanished, Merritt started talking about Joseph in the past tense, like, Joseph was a good guy. Investigators found that really suspicious.
Yeah, I bet.
He also had this hand injury around the time they disappeared, a fresh injury, that he gave kind of vague or unconvincing explanations for.
Okay. And the physical evidence.
Yeah.
The DNA in the car, that must have been huge.
Absolutely crucial. In February 2014, so this is before his arrest, but after the bodies were found, testing finally matched Merritt's DNA to samples taken from the McStay's Isuzu Trooper. His DNA was on the steering wheel, the gear shifter, and the radio and AC controls.
Wow. But wait, you said the swabs were taken earlier?
Yeah, and this is kind of a point of contention, maybe. The DNA swabs from the troopers were actually collected way back in 2010 during the initial missing persons phase by San Diego SO. But the match to Merritt wasn't made until the San Bernardino team had the case and pushed for more testing in 2014.
So that evidence existed for years. That delay, I mean, could that have made a difference early on?
It's hard to say definitively, but it certainly raises questions about, evidence processing backlogs or maybe priorities in the initial phase. Could things have moved faster? Maybe.
Okay, so DNA in the car. What else linked Merritt?
Cell phone records were another major piece. Merritt's phone data put him in the vicinity of the shallow grave sites out near Victorville on February 6, 2010. That's just 2 days after the family was last seen or heard from.
2 days later, near the graves. Okay.
And not only that, his phone activity also showed attempts to access Joseph McStay's QuickBooks account, the business accounting software, after Joseph was already missing. It looked like he might be trying to, alter records or maybe even transfer money. Investigators found he did write checks on Joseph's account totaling over $21,000 after the family disappeared.
So, motive, suspicious behavior, DNA in the car, phone placing him near the graves, messing with finances. It's starting to look like a strong circumstantial case.
It really is. And searches of Merritt's home turned up more disturbing items. They found these handwritten notes or quotes, things about remorse, forgiveness, and even murder.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Now, initially, investigators did think maybe more than one person was involved, just given the logistics of killing and moving a whole family. But the evidence kept pointing more and more directly at Merritt alone.
Any other inconsistencies with this story?
There was a video that surfaced that showed him looking physically capable, which seemed to contradict some claims he'd made about being injured around that time. And his explanations for why he was trying to access Joseph's QuickBooks account, they just kept changing. They didn't add up.
And we should probably reiterate that point about the house, right?
Mhm.
Because they never really got a chance to process it as a primary crime scene back in 2010.
That's a really important point, yeah. Because San Diego SO treated it as a missing persons case, they didn't do the kind of forensic processing you do for a homicide, looking for blood spatter, trace evidence, that sort of thing. By the time San Bernardino investigators got a warrant in 2014, the house had been sold. New owners, new flooring, any potential evidence inside was long gone.
So they had to rely heavily on the car, the gravesite, the digital trail.
Exactly. But the gravesite itself did yield some important clues, even without the house scene.
Right. What did they find there that connected back?
Well, remember that missing futon cover the friend noticed? They found a futon cover buried with Joseph's remains. They also found paint on Summer's bra. The analysis suggested she might have been lying down, perhaps already deceased, when paint was spilled or transferred onto her, maybe linking back to that painting job at the house. And there was a white extension cord found wrapped around Joseph's neck. Just grim details pointing to a violent struggle and disposal.
Okay, so all this evidence, circumstantial as much of it was, led to the trial in 2019. Lay out the arguments for us.
Sure. The trial ran from January to June 2019. The prosecution basically laid out everything we've just discussed. The $30,000 debt and the firing as motive, Merritt talking about Joseph in the past tense, the hand injury, his DNA inside the trooper, the cell phone pings near the graves just 2 days later, the QuickBooks activity and check writing, the items found at his home. They painted a picture of betrayal and murder driven by financial desperation.
And the verdict.
In June 2019, the jury came back with guilty verdicts on all 4 counts of first-degree murder.
Guilty on all counts.
Yeah.
And the sentence.
Sentencing was in January 2020. Merritt received the death penalty for the murders of Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr., and life without the possibility of parole for Joseph's murder.
But California has that moratorium.
Exactly. So while it's a death sentence on paper, it's very unlikely to actually be carried out due to the current moratorium on executions in California.
Okay. And what about the defense? What was their main argument against all this?
Their core argument was that it was all circumstantial. No direct smoking gun evidence like his DNA at the gravesite itself, or a confession, or an eyewitness to the murders. They really hammered on the DNA point. They brought in experts who used a newer, more complex DNA analysis technique called true allele on the samples from the gravesite.
And what did that show? Or what did they claim it showed?
They argued the true allele analysis showed Merritt's DNA was not present in the complex mixtures found on items at the graves, suggesting he wasn't physically there burying the bodies. They tried to use this to argue that maybe someone else was involved, or that investigators got tunnel vision and ignored other potential leads or suspects.
Interesting. So they focused on reasonable doubt based on the lack of direct physical connection to the disposal site.
Precisely. It was a classic circumstantial evidence defense strategy.
This case really does touch on some broader themes we see in true crime, doesn't it? Like the horrific possibility of familicide, driven by something like greed or betrayal.
Absolutely. It's just a devastating scenario, an entire family wiped out. And the idea that it could be motivated by money, by someone Joseph knew and worked with, it adds another layer of just darkness to it. Betrayal of trust.
And it really highlights the problems when a missing persons case turns into a homicide investigation, especially with that early misdirection towards Mexico.
Yeah, that initial focus, heavily influenced by the car's location and that border video, possibly cost valuable time. It really underscores how crucial those first hours and days are, and the need to keep all possibilities open, even when some evidence seems to point strongly one way.
We also see the power and the pitfalls of digital evidence. The cell phone data was key for the prosecution.
Incredibly key, yeah. Placing him near the graves.
But remember, those computer searches on the family's computer about travel to Mexico, that initially supported the misdirection.
Right. It's a double-edged sword. Digital footprints can be incredibly revealing, but they can also be misinterpreted or taken out of context. Investigators have to be so careful piecing it all together.
And it's a prime example of a conviction based almost entirely on circumstantial evidence.
It is. The prosecution wove together many different threads, financial, behavioral, digital, forensic from the car, to create a compelling narrative for the jury. But the defense is, right, inherently, Circumstantial cases leave more room for alternative explanations than cases with direct evidence.
We also shouldn't forget the role of the family, particularly Joseph's father, Patrick McStay. He was relentless.
Oh, absolutely. He was a very vocal advocate for years, pushing investigators, keeping the case in the public eye, refusing to let it go cold. It's a powerful reminder of how victim advocacy can really make a difference, especially in long, complex investigations.
Yeah, his determination was quite remarkable.
It really was.
And technologically, you see both the strengths and maybe some weaknesses. Cell tracking was huge. DNA was huge, eventually.
Right. Modern tools played a massive role, but you also see the challenges, the delay in getting that DNA match from the car, and then the complex arguments about the different types of DNA analysis at the gravesite with true allele. It shows these tools are powerful, but interpreting the results isn't always straightforward, and timely analysis is critical.
Definitely. And finally, a case like this. It just captures public attention, doesn't it? Years of mystery, the shocking discovery. The media and public interest was intense.
Hugely intense, which can be good. It keeps pressure on, maybe brings forward witnesses, but it can also create challenges like dealing with misinformation or intense scrutiny while trying to conduct a careful investigation.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive here, the McStay family case.
Okay.
It was a long, winding road. Started as a baffling disappearance led down a false path towards Mexico, then the absolutely tragic discovery in the desert, and finally, years later, a conviction of Charles Merritt based on a significant amount of circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, that sums it up well. But as we noted, even with that conviction, some fuzziness remains about the exact sequence of events inside the house that night. And the defense did raise points about the lack of Merritt's DNA at the graves and whether other leads were fully explored. Those questions linger for some.
And fundamentally, it's just an immense human tragedy, a stark reminder of the devastation violence leaves behind, destroying not just lives, but entire families and impacting communities. The loss is just unimaginable.
Truly. And for anyone listening who wants to go deeper, we have put together links to articles, that investigative report we mentioned, and Joseph's father, Patrick, actually wrote a book about his search for answers. Exploring those might give you more perspectives on the details and the remaining questions. We definitely encourage you to look into it further if you're interested.
Definitely worth exploring. So, maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Reflecting on the McStay story, what does it tell us about trust, about how easily it can be broken, the terrible impact of betrayal, and, I guess, the often difficult and complex path towards finding justice after such an immense loss? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us out. Until next time, take care and keep your chores company.